Thanks a lot for joining us today. As we were just talking, next year is going to be a big year for fan advocacy. So influencer marketing is also a very hot topic right now. And in this panel, we're going to try to understand why brands are using their fans to drive conversation around the brands. What are the different ways that you can do fan advocacy within the event sponsorship context, and what are the main challenges in the industry? I think this is the, yes. As we're going to talk about many grassroots initiatives, I think it's very important for us to understand influence at a personal level. And also, if we start looking at it, maybe having a different approach. So we're going to try to understand influence, and I think it helps to look at it in terms of spheres. So we're here in the middle, and we all have friends and family that we go to when we need advice on what to do, what to wear, what to buy. Then we also have the friends of friends, so that extended circle, people that we follow or that we admire because we think they're quite cool. We also have that people and experts on specific fields that we're interested in. And then we have celebrities. So basically, these spheres kind of represent the authority that people have over the decisions that we make. But the reality is that as we move away from the middle of us and our friends and family and our extended circle, that sphere of influence starts to break. So we're going to be focusing on grassroots activities in this panel, so that is why we're going to focus on the friends and family and extended circle, that circle of trust, as some people say. And I think it's important to start understanding that if we tap onto the right people, then brands can actually find a really interesting way of engaging people in an effective way. So there are very different ways of doing event sponsorship. Let's look at the Oscars, because who doesn't love the Oscars? I got this example because I thought it was a good kind of show the two ways you can do event sponsorship. On the left-hand side, we have Swarovski, who has been sponsoring the Oscars for 10 years. They basically put all of the diamonds in the event, and they make everything look amazing. And then we have on the right-hand side, we have Samsung, who only sponsored the Oscars for 1 year, which costed $20 million, but they got the most recognizable selfie of all times. So I think this kind of shows that there is different dynamics that you can take when doing event sponsorship. You can either go long-term or you can go short-term. They probably have lots of different learnings to share about what is the best way to do it. But these events, like the Oscars, are events that have multiple types of sponsors. And I wanted to share with you an example of something that I worked on. So in 2014, I was working for McDonald's in Latin America. And McDonald's was one of the 13 other sponsors that were also involved in the FIFA World Cup. So this represented a huge challenge on how do we actually make sure that McDonald's is one of the brands recognized as a sponsor, and how do we cut through? So we designed like an ecosystem where we matched hardcore McDonald's fans with other kids that were very passionate about Happy Meals and their parents, and we built small communities around the brand. And we mixed that with celebrities and with YouTubers and Instagrammers, and all of that allowed the brand to score at the third position in the whole ranking of the most recognizable brands during the FIFA World Cup. So this is a big challenge that many brands have, And we're going to be talking about how different brands in different situations tap on the fan advocacy to really establish their brands and use them as a way of doing brand building. So, without further ado, we're going to go with you, Joe. Yes. So, we're going to talk about the challenge of staying relevant. And next slide. Should be in there. Someone from IT, you can help me.
Oh, there we are.
Okay, here it is. Amazing. Thank you.
So I'm very briefly going to talk for no more than sort of 6-7 minutes about a brief that we had from Adidas, which felt very appropriate for the event that we're at today, which is around redefining influence. And the brief came through to us because, frankly, we'd got lazy. The brand had got lazy, and perhaps ourselves as an agency had got a little bit lazy. We were working with pretty much all of the biggest influencers you could imagine in football at the time, and it became quite formulaic in the way that we were working with them. Big product drop comes out. Who's the biggest influencer? Apply them to the campaign, and then jobs are good. So what we actually wanted to do was take a bit of a wider look at influence and actually try and redefine it for the brand itself. So we weren't trying to reinvent the market itself. We were trying to reinvent the language in the business about how we defined influence. And one of the problems we were facing with some of the larger influencers is that it's competitive. So these are the guys that everyone wants to work with. They're expensive, and also they're promiscuous. They will work with virtually any brand that can put enough money under their nose. And that leaves you quite exposed to the control that you can have over their message. So what we wanted to do was start to look at some of the theory and some of the sort of theoretical writing and academia around influence itself. And Brian earlier this morning covered quite a lot of this topic. But one of the authors that we were most inspired by when we were doing this research was Gladwell. So as an agency, we obviously look for, what causes people to share. As a social agency, we're looking to understand the mechanics and how things catch fire and how things spread and how you get these kind of like social epidemics. And obviously, The Tipping Point is an incredible book which breaks that down. And also, we're the global agency of record for Adidas, and the way that he breaks down his audiences into connectors, mavens, and salesmen is actually a really good framework for us to have at a global level that we can then apply out to markets, and it gives us buckets to be able to put influencers in. And one of the things that we were most struck by in the book was the idea of connectors, because connectors, as he says, are the people that link us up into the world, introduce us, our social circles are connectors. Connectors are the social glue, and they spread it. And that really chimed with the work that we were currently doing within the football world, because it's obvious that you can speak to one person who's got 1 million followers, but what could be more interesting is could we speak to 500 people with 2,000 followers? That feels like that's a bit more everyday, a bit more grassroots, and actually those are the people that are in those immediate spheres of influence. The issue is that they're much harder to find. By definition, they're a lot smaller, they're not quite as public. So how are we going to go and find them? So we went back to the data and we thought, well, if these are the guys that are potentially out there, the theory says that these are the guys that are sharing and these are the guys that are connecting everyone. So let's look at the data around sharing. And something struck us quite immediately, which was that 70% of all shares come from dark social. So not only are these people not particularly visible in terms of the follower numbers they have, they're also pretty hidden because they're doing the vast majority of their work under the radar. And that figure is a global figure. In the UK, it's 75%. And in our target market that we're aiming for, it's even higher. Estimates anything up to 85 to potentially even 90% of all sharing. And this is quite simple to find, this stat, because when you look at traffic sources on YouTube videos, quite often the vast majority of the traffic source is just unknown. So it leads you to believe that this is happening in instant messengers, on email, sort of slightly old school method, but these are the things, it's really happening. So we now know that there are these people out there that are connectors that aren't particularly easy to find, and we also know that they're doing the vast majority of their work offline, so we know how we're going to try and communicate with them. We then had to look at our audience. So audience are football-obsessed teens, 14 to 19-year-olds, with about 17 being the sweet spot, and they are football-obsessed. We are talking first thing they wake up and the last thing they do at night. They're either playing, they're playing FIFA, or they're at school talking about it, and they're just consuming incredible amounts of content. So for us to then be able to go and find out a definition of what makes a football connector, we actually had to transport ourselves back to the playground and go, well, who would have been the most influential person on the playground? It's probably the football captain. If you were ever going to look to anyone for a source of authority about which boots to wear, you're probably going to take your cues from the top striker or the captain of that team. So then we've suddenly got a new definition of influence, which is the connectors. We've got a way of communicating with them, which is through dark social or instant messenger. And we know that we're probably looking for football captains. And off the back of that, Tango Squads was born. So Tango Squads are groups of hyper-connected, football-obsessed teens that operate on dark social in our key cities. I'll come on to some of the stats later, but we basically set up kind of private Facebook Messenger groups of anything up to 250 kids in key cities around the world, so about 11 key markets currently operating. So we've suddenly got this big audience of kids, but we don't necessarily know how we're going to activate them, and that's where our event sponsorship comes in. So I've just talked about the Facebook Messenger. So that's where our event sponsorship comes in. So we know that these kids are looking for social currency. Brian also talked about that this morning. And we know that we sponsor the Champions League, and that gives us massive access to one-off experiences, incredible exclusive content, and also quite a lot of products. So Champions League kits and the balls and the boots themselves. This program allowed us to activate a lot of the rights that weren't being used by Adidas at a global level and actually put those rights in the hands of our consumers. So the other main benefit of these groups is that these kids got them first, and that's the currency that I was talking about. We actually, there were competitions running for kids to go and meet Leo Messi, obviously multiple Champions League winner, greatest player of all time. These are two of the kids there. But these kids also got to announce the signing of Paul POGBA. I mean, admittedly, they got this about 2 minutes before the rest of the world got this, but they got exclusive content delivered direct to their handset of Paul POGBA saying, I'm back at United, before anyone else got hold of it. And then they start to share that message for us. And then also they get access to exclusive products like Glitch. For those who don't know, Glitch is it's a modular boot, as you can see. It comes with an outer skin. It's only available via an app, and to get the app, you have to get a code. But we got access to these codes, so we can provide these kids with those codes, and then they can start sharing them on their behalf. And the more they share those codes, the better discounts they get on the product itself. So the whole goal is for us with this project is to deliver fame for these kids. What we'd realised is that we were taking a very old school approach, a very top-down approach to influencer marketing. Let's go find the biggest person and get them to send it out to their message. How can we flip that on its head, and how can we grow from the ground up? So one of the ideas with this program is that, as you can see, these are some of the kids that are in our program. We want to make these kids famous, because if we can take these kids and turn them into influencers, they're going to be loyal to our brand, and that's what they're looking for. They want to be famous. So we want to grow them from the ground up and have an army of people that are basically telling our story for us. So far, we're live in 11 markets, which is in 15 key cities, and we've got 1,500 plus kids. This is slightly out of date. We're probably anything up to about 2,000 now. And that's a pretty powerful army of basically our target market around the world who've got a direct link into the brand and, again, exclusive experiences provided by the Champions League for us. And that's the end of it. That's my piece on Tango Squads.
Thanks, Joe. I'm Sophie Morris. But before I tell you more about me, actually, I'd like to find out a little bit more about you. So if I could have the lights up, and I'm going to ask a few questions, please. How many of you currently work for a company that sponsors something? Oh, quite a few. Or works for an agency that helps a sponsor activate, in fact. Okay, thank you. How many are you fans of rugby? Okay, good number. And how many of you would watch a female or a women's rugby game? A few less, but still some good numbers, thank you. Okay, lights back down, thank you very much. So I spent the majority of my career as a brand side marketeer in financial services. I got into sponsorship as a result of sponsoring an international rugby team, hence the rugby question. And I founded Millharbour Marketing 5 years ago. We are a marketing and sponsorship consultancy, and we work with rights holders, so that the sponsoring property, helping them understand brand needs, what a marketer is thinking and what they need to know when they're making their decisions. Importantly, on what to offer you in propositions, but equally in how to manage that relationship and measure it. And then on the sponsor side, we help with finding, planning, activating, integrating, and measuring that sponsorship. I'm also board director of the European Sponsorship Association. I judge the UK Sponsorship and European Sponsorship Awards, and the reason for telling you that is I've been asked to pick 2 examples, so they're not my own work, 2 examples from industry that I think are the best examples for one for employee advocacy and one for fan advocacy. I think generally, I think I agree with the rest of the panel so far that advocacy is going to be a strong influence in the coming year. Sponsorship by its nature tends to have a lot of influences, whether that's the sports athletes or if it's the producer of a play, that they tend to have those assets already, so they'll have ambassador appearances. What sponsors need to help maximize the assets they've got and the return on their objectives and investments is getting a greater standout and a greater share of voice, and in some instances, reaching audiences that they wouldn't necessarily be able to do through the other channels that they own. So the 2 examples that I'm going to give, the first one is employee advocacy, and this is with AIG. Hopefully, I think the days are gone when, in terms of employee engagement, specifically to sponsorship, or if there are just some tickets left, or maybe there's some football shirts left over, we'll give them to staff, we'll hand out a competition. I certainly see more companies having employee engagement as one of the key objectives. Certainly one of the companies that we work with, a rugby rights holder, that's their sole objective of the partnership. It's a tech recruiter, is to give their staff mentoring and volunteering opportunities with the rugby rights holder. With AIG, should move on. So AIG and O2 are the 2, and AIG is going to be the employee advocacy model. They told me that staff engagement, staff morale, and staff advocacy are in their top 3 objectives for their sponsorship. That's along with building client relationships and brand awareness. So I'm going to focus on their rugby sponsorships. If you don't know, they sponsor the New Zealand team, which is the All Blacks, and they also sponsor USA Rugby. And they have a commercial window of opportunity whenever those teams are called together. In 2012, when they announced the All Blacks partnership, they gave every one of their 40,000 members of staff a jersey. It doesn't sound like much, but if you figure out the cost, that's quite an investment just in a gifting exercise on its own. And they still use collateral and merchandise in their recruiting and in employee recognition. But what I particularly like about them is the prominence that they give to their premium assets. So this is an employee family day. So normally you might get 3 ambassadors turn up for an hour's photo shoot, something like this. Here we've got half the All Blacks team. This is in 2015, that's why you see Richie McGaw in the middle, with lots of staff children. And they had a whole day, employee training. Staff had a great session with rugby skills with the All Blacks. They could have given this to clients, and in fact, if you look through some of their tweets, you'll find there's a few fans saying, oh, why can't we meet the All Blacks? Well, the All Blacks do that themselves. They have all of their promotional opportunities for the public. So AIG purposefully keep that to their staff. And there's a few more photos here of staff in their offices. And what I quite like, branding in the offices. One of the things I really liked what they did on the recent British and Irish Lions tour was give all of their UK-based employees a desk drop. So there was some New Zealand coffee, there was a mug because the games were in the morning, a how-to-watch guide, and so to get staff that might not know rugby, how to understand and get along with the game. But really interesting, and this feeds back into the earlier session on gamification as well, they built Rugby Picks, which is a fantasy score prediction game. Again, to get them engaged with what the All Blacks were doing. They could obviously score themselves, but they had inter-team competitions. This came at a time in particular when the company was going through some management change, so that was a really important thing for them to do, was bring teams together, build on the relationships that they had, and do so in a way that could also engage them with their sponsorship. In terms of engagement across the company, 62 of the company's officers directly engage in these programs, whether it's something around the Rugby World Cup or whether it's doing something small in their office. So, this is one of their very recent tweets. I wanted to see how the story came from the Rugby World Cup right through to today. This was around the recent game against the Barbarians. So just at the end of October, again, another family day, a day with All Blacks. So I'll move on to O2 because I've got a bit more detail around this. Now, they have sponsored England rugby since 1995 when the game turned professional. But what they did in particular around fan advocacy is set up the Rose Army. Now, this was created for the Rugby World Cup. They weren't a Rugby World Cup sponsor, so they couldn't associate themselves directly with that tournament, but of course they wanted to show support for the team, and they wanted to still be able to speak around that time. So the Rose Army allowed them to amplify the messages that they were giving and to adopt this fan advocacy model. The whole of their campaign manifested itself through this wearing the rose that appears on the England rugby shirt, and making the team giants because they were hosting the tournament. And something else to add to this, if you're not a fan of rugby at the Rugby World Cup, then the logos disappear from the fronts of shirts. So for the World Cup, O2 wouldn't be appearing on these shirts. So wear the rose also kind of meant bring on, wear your shirt that's got the O2 on, wear your original shirt, so they're still part of it. So this is the kind of the glossy photo of the Wear the Rose. This is an actual photo of the Rose Army. And they were 100 in total superfans who were found through social media. They probably had in the high hundreds to low thousands of followers through social media. They were picked not because they are obviously influencers with thousands of followers, but genuine super fans of England rugby. And as a sponsor, that's what they're trying to tap into. They're trying to tap into the fans of somebody else. They were given special access to events. But the value that they really got was in the status of being this super fan and being part of this quite exclusive group of the Rose Army. And what they did over the period of the Rugby World Cup, they were set various challenges that they had to do and had to create content around that and then post that in their networks and do things together. And I'm going to show you one of those videos now.
Hi, I'm Matt, a member of O2's Rose Army. We're 100 of the most dedicated rugby fans in England. And over the last few weeks, we've been completing challenges to show our commitment to the team.
Let's give them a great big cheer!
This week, Alex Payne from O2's Inside Line challenged us to persuade non-rugby fans to wear the rose. So we set to work looking for the very best the sporting world has to offer.
Oi, wrong sport.
Ice hockey players, fishermen, gymnasts, show jumpers, cyclists.
Normally I like to go out in ridiculous tight fluoro clothing, but this weekend I'll be wearing the rose.
Marathon runners, kayakers, bodybuilders, dancers and rock climbers all pledged their support. We even snuck some shirts into the Oval.
Here I am at the Oval with Jamie.
To convert some cricket fans at the Ashes.
Come on, England!
And some familiar faces from boxing,
England packs a punch.
hockey,
We are the Coventry Blaze hockey team.
and football
I'm John Gregory.
also lined up to show their colours. Another challenge successfully completed by the Rose Army.
Wear the rose!
Bring on the next challenge. Come on, England!
So you can see it's all shot on their own phones. O2 and England Rugby weren't involved in any of the production, and they were set these challenges, but also they set themselves challenges. So it might be something simple like to bake a cake in the shape of a rugby ball or something, and that really kept the community going. Throughout the tournament, they created 2,000 videos throughout the army in just 8 weeks. And they got, that contributed to 6 million impressions on Twitter and 1.2 million video views through O2 channels. Some of the metrics around the wider sponsorship were that they achieved 67% of share of voice across all the Rugby World Cup media. They found it translated into increased social media base, obviously for O2, and importantly increased footfall in shops. One of the key metrics, though, for O2 as a telecoms brand was awareness of the O2 priority service. If you know that, this is getting tickets and things early. And awareness of that service rose by 9% for their customers. What I really like about this even more, though, is it's genuine fans. They went out to find them, but they kept it going. These are just some more activations that they did around the World Cup. They keep this going. Obviously, it was the Rugby World Cup, and it was for 8 weeks, but they realised, that Seven League realised that we've set up a community. We can't just let this go now. So they've continued it. They also supported the Women's Rugby World Cup, which was earlier this year. And the video for that one doesn't work, so I'm going to skip to the next one. And I think this is for me, is a really good case study to show how, given a tricky situation when they're not an official sponsor of the World Cup, they still need to have a voice. They need to target segments that they can't do through their own channels, and they set up this Rose Army of a way of achieving both of those. I'm sorry that I can't go into the detail that I would like to if I was those brands, but hopefully I've just given you a couple of examples of how you can do this. And I'm going to leave you with one final thought, which is a completely unashamed advert for women's rugby, being a former player.
Girls in white dresses with blue satin sashes, snowflakes that stay on my nose and eyelashes, wild geese that fly with the moon on their wings. These are a few of my favorite things. When the dog bites, when the bee stings, when I'm feeling sad, I simply remember my favorite things, and then I don't feel so bad.
Could I have the lights up one more time, please? In the audience? Lovely, thank you. Can I ask again if anyone would consider watching a women's rugby game? Hands up, please. Lovely, that's a great percentage increase. Thank you very much, thank you.
Thanks for that, Sophie. My name's Mark. Hello, I'm from Qubist. So you might have seen a bit of Qubist when Pete Jenkins was presenting earlier on gamification. I'm just going to do a short presentation on one of our clients, which is Mauritius, and our sponsorship of them when they sponsored a tournament called Afro-Asia in Mauritius, which is a golf tournament. So Afro-Asia was a combination, it's a new event, and it was a combination of 3 tours for the first time. So it was a huge opportunity for Air Mauritius to get their sponsorship in front of new eyes and new people. But it's a bit of a challenge because Air Mauritius are a challenger brand. They're up against people like British Airways and Emirates. They're up against the big boys, really. So they've got quite low brand awareness. They've got quite low brand awareness in terms of their competitors. And so really for this event, it was about us trying to see how we could do something more than existing marketing, really. So more than just a logo on billboards, more than just a kind of name on the side. We was really trying to kind of work out how we could go further with the sponsorship. So we know that Air Mauritius has got a lot of good positive sentiment around it, and sort of organic word of mouth marketing, because it's the national airline. It's kind of seen as the authentic airline of Mauritius. The challenge for us was kind of how do we scale that? How do we go further? Because it's only going to go so big. So our vision really was to place Air Mauritius sponsorship in front of a new targeted audience. So we created what we called a content bible, and we looked at the event and we worked with a journalist to map out the different scenarios of how this golf event could unfold. So it could be a hole-in-one. In Mauritius, you get bizarre things like deer going across the course while people are playing. It could have been a rookie golf player coming up and competing at a higher level than they usually would. So we looked at the different sort of permutations and scenarios of how this event could transpire. And we created a whole suite of content prior to the event, images, infographics, these kind of things that we hope would be shared once the event went live. The next bit, which is critical and follows up on the Basumo and Brandwatch talk earlier on amplification, was getting advocates involved. Because if we had this content, we knew it would just sit there and just get shared a bit if we didn't get other people to influence and to share it. And so we invited golf influencers and customer fans to our platform, Qubist, which is a tech platform. And we did that because once the advocates are invited to the platform, you can measure activity. I'm not sure what this is jumping ahead, sorry. You can measure activity and what your advocates are doing, and it's a better way of kind of organising who's sharing what and when, and seeing what content's doing well. So we invited advocates through social listening. We looked at people online who are kind of golf fans and who we thought might be interested in getting involved with the event. We worked with a lot of different people on Mauritius on the island, with hoteliers, with ground handlers, those type of people, and we had some knowledge around that as well. We also ran a competition, inviting people to volunteer in a competition to share content if they were golf fans. So we ran a competition, and then we were able to do a quiz where we could qualify the audience to see if they'd be the right fit for the competition. So we brought all these strands together, which we hoped would amplify the content that we were creating. So the next part was when the event took place, we worked with a really good golf journalist, and he's kind of US Open journalist. He follows all of the events, and he was on the ground following the event as it rolled on. So he was taking live footage. He was kind of writing up different things that are happening in real time. And he was relaying this to another of our crew from Qubist on the ground and the team in the UK. So the idea was to capture this real-time content and then get it out as part of our content suite so advocates could share it. So this content, like I said, some of it was kind of infographic-based. One of the things that we prepared for in the event was a hole-in-one. We didn't really think it was going to happen, and we presumed maybe 60% of the content that we created would be used, and maybe 40% wouldn't. And that's the way we went about it. We thought some of it would be used and some of it wouldn't, and that was fine because we just wanted to be ready for it to happen. But a hole-in-one did happen. Our golf journalist was there taking pictures. We were able to kind of put that into a pre-existing template, which was like an infographic, a bit similar to this, and that became one of the most shared pieces of content in the whole event from anyone. And going back to what Phil was saying earlier from Copper 90, it was contextual, so it's about getting real-time content out to golf fans at the right time that they were passionate about and that they wanted to share. So going back to what Sophie was saying in terms of network, all of these advocates, golf advocates and influencers that we'd got onto the platform were sharing to their friends and their family and their peers. Now, these weren't huge influencers. They weren't kind of Instagrammer types. And going back to what Joe said, we were looking more for people who had maybe like 1,000, 2,000 in terms of followers rather than 50,000. We were just looking to get out to the right people who had a number of people that were engaging with them, and that had highly trusted networks that would be able to kind of see this content and be influenced by it. So we made it really easy for advocates to share. This is Qubist on the mobile app. So you log into it. You can share on LinkedIn, Instagram, all of the social platforms. You get content coming up every 30 minutes. As you share content, like Pete was saying before about gamification, we have a leaderboard. It's gamified. You get points. You get rewards. That it's not financially incentivized, but it's a bit like Duolingo or Strava. It's a fun thing to do. You see everyone else doing it, and you get involved in it. So it's easy to share. It was easy to engage with the event that people are passionate about, and all the content we shared was Mauritius branded. So it really allowed us as a sponsor to be seen. And until then, as I said before, quite a small airline, a challenger brand. This allowed us to get out to a huge amount of people. We're also able to get out to different areas when we're sharing content like the Air Mauritius blog. And one of the key things about Air Mauritius is that we try and tie it to Mauritius, the destination. So when you think Mauritius, you think Air Mauritius, and this has been a kind of long-standing part of our strategy, which something like BA or Emirates hasn't got. We're really tied to the destination. Lots of people who work for Air Mauritius have got sisters, brothers, uncles, aunties. So it's a kind of family brand, and we wanted to play on that. So engagement drove interest to the blog and other areas. People started reading more about Mauritius and engaging with it in different areas. So it's getting the sponsorship to work harder. And we also had some commercial messages we put out during the competition. So when you fly with Air Mauritius, one of the key commercial messages is that you get your golf bag free. So if you are a golfer and you're into this stuff, carrying your golf bag for free is quite a big thing. It's like having your skis or something like that. It just makes everything easier, and you just know that you're going to kind of get them the other side, and it's pretty simple. So, going back to what I said at the start, using Qubist and using a tech platform enables us to scale this whole campaign where we wouldn't have been able to do that otherwise. Getting even a small amount of advocates involved allowed us to amplify our messages and our content to more people. We exceeded all client expectations during this event, and it became a model for other campaigns that we did. We were serving relevant content at the right time, contextual content, and it meant that this challenger could kind of punch above their weight in terms of where they were in a market by using influencers and scaling on social media. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Sorry. So we all, with everything that we've been talking about, we know that event sponsorship needs to work a lot harder for brands. So how does fan advocacy fit in the wider picture there?
I think sponsorship has come a long way, hopefully come a long way from Chairman's whim, where just because the highest paid person likes a particular sport or a particular art or theatre, they just go and sponsor that for tickets. So I think marketeers are having to work a lot harder, and they're having to justify the spend and the investment that they're making in that, and they're having to work harder on proving the return on their objectives. So I think this can certainly help them to amplify the activation that they do. We see a lot of sponsors that activate the assets they're given very well. So if that is a sporting event, it might be, you know, they put all their branding in the right place and they do all the right communications out to their fans. You don't necessarily always see that integrating throughout the rest of their marketing. And I think that sort of fan advocacy and employee advocacy is a great way of amplifying that message. I think sponsorship is quite unique in being able to work the whole way across the promotional mix and bring everything together. And I think fan advocacy is a new way of being able to do that in a really trusted and authentic way.
Yeah, I'll just add to that and say that from experience, one of the things that we've seen is that quite often the people who are negotiating the rights for that sponsorship aren't the people who've then got to activate against them. So you may have a team that are going out and negotiating hard on what access that sponsorship will give you, and then they just hand it over to a marketing department who aren't prepared. So quite often making sure that our marketing department is aligned with a team who look after fan advocacy or a team who look after employee branding means that you can ensure that every part of that right is executed the right way. In the past, you would see a lot of corporate boxes, football pitches that are empty effectively because there's no key stakeholder or supplier that needs to be entertained that week. Well, that should never be the case because you've paid for that box to be there. So why not fill that why not offer that exclusive experience out to employees or proper fans?
Yeah, I'd just add that I think it's you know, really about long-term relationships. It's kind of sustainable relationships with your audience, and so I think with some of the sort of challenges on these platforms that we're talking about, or you know, the kind of dark net in terms of instant messaging and being able to reach these people out there. It's being able to kind of reach them with the right content, something that's relevant for them, but building like a sustainable relationship that, you know, lasts for a while. And I think so much of sponsorship is just kind of like a hit and run really, and then it's kind of over. And I think, you know, the brands have got a real opportunity with their fans to build something bigger, and that's quite exciting, I think. And you know, if you give over the brand keys a little bit and you let your fans speak and have a voice, and a lot of brands are kind of scared of that, but once you do that, we saw with GE earlier, you know, it's a huge business. And you look at them and you think, well, if they can do their employees, then it's a sort of resonates in the same way with fans, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And Sophie, you were just mentioning that you have to kind of justify why you get into event sponsorship. And I was really interested to understand how you guys measure success of an event sponsorship.
Yeah, I think it's always against the objective, so it's different for everyone. For one company, if they're entering a new market, it will be brand awareness. For others, it might be sales. And for most, you're going to want some kind of brand uplift. If we look at the IPA's recent Media and Focus report, they identified sponsorship being the single element that can drive brand building the most out of the whole of the promotional mix. I think we're also in a stage in marketing where we are, the short-term things are easy to measure, the likes, the hits, the views. It's easy, it's quick, and so maybe we report on that more because it's easy and quick, so management asked for us to report on that more because it's easy and quick, and it's harder to measure the long-term brand build. But I think if you're investing a lot of money in sponsorship, and that is the key driver that it can work towards, which obviously is then a key influence on long-term profit growth and market share, which are the kind of the big business objectives, then we need to be measuring against those and not just what we would call output measures, which is how many people turned up at an event, how many people sampled a soft drink, what is the actual behaviour change as a result of that, so the longer term objectives.
And what do you think, Joe, from an Adidas perspective, as they have been sponsoring events for so many years? Where do you think it's the focus of them?
Well, quite often from an Adidas side, probably the longest standing sponsorship would be the World Cup. And given Adidas's heritage in the sport, owning that World Cup ball is probably the most iconic football artifact going. And so to validate yourself as the original or authentic, you know, they created the first ever studded football boot, Adidas did, and to maintain that authenticity through the sport is hugely important to them. So we're now taking that kind of those fundamentals of authenticity and applying them to the new way of using sponsorship, which is actually bringing our most engaged and most sort of lookalike audiences for who we want to sell to into those sponsorships directly.
Perfect. Well, I'm conscious of time, so I just wanted to get a sense from you. Where do you see this area growing in 2018, and where do you see it going?
Well, I think, like as you alluded to sort of at the start, I think next year is going to be a huge year for sport. So I think it's a great opportunity for brands, certainly within that particular sector, to kind of, you know, we've been speaking about it a bit today, to take advantage of that. To look at their audience, to segment it, to look at their motivations and needs. What are they really into, and how can you, as we spoke about kind of earlier in the summit, kind of how can you be useful? And I think if you do that, then I think you have got an opportunity to influence, as Sophie was saying, and Brian said this morning, and real influence in terms of affecting a change on someone or something, not just attention or popularity. So I think, yeah, there's lots of opportunity next year, and I'm hopeful that more brands will begin to kind of switch on their advocates and their fans.
For me, I think we've seen, certainly with our own clients and ESSA, the European Sponsorship Association, we've seen a big increase in the last year in employee engagement and CSR as well in sponsorship, and true CSR, not kind of just the tick box and nice photo. So I think we can see advocacy coming more into sponsorship. As I said in my presentation, you tend to get the influencer as part of your normal assets, but the sponsor is already paid for access to a certain audience. So providing that audience, not the brand's own audience, but the sponsor property's audience with value in a framework, that's the way that they can really reach out and speak in a genuine and trustworthy, authentic way, I think.
The only thing I'd add is just about not being lazy. So I think we've sort of slightly fell into a trap with working with the sort of bigger, more obvious influencers. Yeah. But as you say, if you've invested X amount into a sponsorship and you've already got a captive audience, work it. Make sure every single right is activated across all the parts of the marketing division.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, and I think this was really insightful, and thanks everyone for joining us today.